Right, so today's planting is yet again going to be in two parts. So part one is going to be a mystery tree. So this is going in next to the stump of Ficrea foetida, which is the Mauritius hemp, which is a sort of sisal-like plant often used to make rope. When they flower, they die, and they leave behind hundreds and hundreds of babies in a very impressive stump. And this one, having been very scenic and sort of a focal point in the sort of opening in the middle of my thicket, I suppose, for a while, sent up a beautiful flower stalk and then just died. So I'm going to use the stump before it completely rots away as a little shelter for this mystery tree, which I think might be Uapaca lysopyrena, but that is possibly wishful thinking, because that is a tree I would very much like. That's a native fruit tree which has stilt roots, and yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful tree. It really doesn't tolerate fire and is mostly restricted to sort of river valleys around Zambia, but it's a really stunning tree, and it's not going to be that demanding if it is that, because it can really tolerate much drier environments than it's usually found in, provided there's no fire. This is an area that does get a certain amount of irrigation anyway, because there's a lot of the sort of more tender fruit trees in this area, which do need a little bit more sort of care year-round than a lot of our native trees, so it really shouldn't be an issue about drying out here. There are a couple of other things it could be again, but all of them should be pretty happy in a sort of pseudo-riverine thicket environment. The companion plants for this, I'm going to be choosing ones that are very, very shade tolerant, much more shade tolerant than they really need to be, just because this area does tend to get invaded quite regularly by some of the Nephrolipis ferns, which are lovely plants, but they do tend to sort of spread. One of them is native, one of them is not native, but both of them have a habit of sort of moving into areas, and if I'm not quick about removing them, things that aren't shade tolerant might have trouble with that. So we're going to be starting with a little piece of the Aloe lampellus, the climbing aloe, which got kicked off the original banana tree planting by the chickens. The original piece of the Aloe lampellus is well rooted, and there are a few suckers coming off it now, but this little one, yeah, it got dislodged, and I thought this would do quite well here, because if the ferns do start moving in, hopefully it will climb up through them quite merrily. They are very good at climbing out of low growth. We're also going to be hoping for that with this little orchid I'm putting in. This really should be going in a tree crook or in sort of deep leaf litter. It's not a ground orchid, but does cope very well in sand. It had been undermined by some pouched rats, so it needed moving. Anyway, I think I know the species name. It will be up on the screen. And then finally we're going to be putting in a couple of pieces of the peperomia, which are really, really shade tolerant, and again, I have had these completely swamped by sword ferns in the past, and you're going to pull up the sword ferns and there's the peperomia looking perfectly happy with its life. Part two of today's planting is appropriately, because it came from the garden of the person who this sort of carbon offset part two is for, is a Dracaena steudneri. Now this one has been trying to root in a bag, but it hasn't been very successful. It's got some little nubbins, but no roots produced, and I think that's partially because in a bag it's getting too cold at night, whereas in the soil the temperature is going to be a lot more stable, so it's not going to cool down that much overnight and heat up too much during the day. It's not going to sort of confuse the roots in the same way, so that should cope well. We're going to sort of make this a slightly more functional planting than just putting a Dracaena in by adding a kiwi vine. So this is the Chinese gooseberry, sometimes called. I'm not entirely sure of the Latin name of that, but it'll be up on the screen. These are male-female, so I will be planting another one somewhere nearby soon. They are a little bit tender, I found. That they are particularly inclined, especially in raised, well-drained areas, to dry out and die if I'm away for more than a couple of weeks at a time. So we're going to be giving this a lot of shelter. It's in a little nook, again, quite close to where I planted the Java plum. It's in a little nook, so it shouldn't get too much wind drying, but just to keep it a little bit moister, we're going to be surrounding it with a few pieces of the Calico prolifera, which is the box bells. We're also going to be putting in a single piece of Aloe cameroni, which should also spread out to form a nice thicket. This can then sort of scramble up through those and sort of lean on them and eventually climb the Dracaena itself without drying out around the base too much, which is what I think is going to be the real risk here. And that should be everything for tonight. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you haven't enjoyed it, thank you for watching anyway. Please tune in again tomorrow. I will be planting something else. I have no idea yet what that's going to be, so we will see.